Russia is deep into a high-stakes war, but its economy seems to be defying gravity. So how is that possible? Well, in this explainer, we're going to connect the dots between 1,000 years of history, a completely rewired war economy, and a huge strategic gamble to really understand what's fueling this conflict. And this, right here, is the central puzzle we need to solve. You've got this barrage of sanctions on one side, staggering military losses on the other, and yet the war effort isn't just surviving, it's actually expanding. It's a contradiction that just doesn't seem to make sense, and we're going to break down exactly how it works. I mean, just look at this imbalance. You'd think the scales would be tipping hard against Russia, right? Weighed down by all these sanctions and heavy losses. But the other side is actually rising, lifted by official GDP growth and a military that's more than quadrupled in size for this operation. This goes way beyond just numbers. This is about a state that has fundamentally rewired its entire economy for one purpose: war. So, to solve this puzzle, here's our game plan. We'll start with the paradox itself, then trace its roots back through Russia's history, dissect its war economy, get inside the Kremlin's strategic thinking, and finally, look at the possible futures that lie ahead. All right, first up, let's take a closer look at this wartime paradox. To really get what's happening in Russia today, you have to go back, way back. Its entire identity has been forged by a 1,000-year-long struggle with its own vast, unforgiving geography. You can see this pattern, right? Russian history is a story of these massive cycles: formation, then collapse, then a new, even more centralized power rising from the ashes. From Kievan Rus through the Mongol invasion, the Tsarist Empire, the Soviet Union, each time it fell apart, it was followed by an even stronger central government. And that pattern has left a really deep mark on the national psyche. Think about it. The land itself was calling the shots. The huge northern forests gave them protection and resources. But the southern steppe? That was basically a superhighway for invaders for centuries. And with no natural barriers like mountains to the west, survival meant only one thing: you had to keep expanding to create a buffer zone. So this unique geography hammered home one core belief: to be secure, Russia has to be strong and centralized. So here's the crucial takeaway from all that history. Centuries of defending this enormous, vulnerable territory created a political tradition that prizes strong, centralized, autocratic rule above everything else. And that historical DNA is absolutely critical to understanding the state's modern machinery. Which brings us right into the engine room of the modern war machine. Let's break down the men, the money, and the materials that are fueling this whole thing. I mean, just look at the sheer scale of this expansion. From an initial force of about 150,000 to over 600,000 troops. This isn't just about replacing losses. This is a colossal mobilization of manpower. And it's being driven by drafts and, maybe more importantly, some really powerful financial incentives. Which, of course, leads to the billion-dollar question. Literally, an army that size, equipped for a high-intensity war, has a staggering price tag. So where is all that money coming from, especially now that most Western markets are cut off? And boom, here is a huge piece of the answer. Even with all the sanctions and price caps, Russia is still pulling in over €500 million every single day from fossil fuels. That is a massive river of cash flowing directly into the Kremlin's war chest. And this chart shows you exactly how they're doing it. That pivot to the east we've all heard about? Well, it's not a concept anymore. It's a hard reality. China and India are now buying up the vast majority of Russia's energy exports, creating a financial lifeline that completely bypasses Western sanctions. And hey, notice the EU is still in there for 8%? A little reminder of the loopholes that still exist. But, this whole wartime economy, it comes at a steep price for the average Russian citizen. The state is making a very clear choice: fund the military by basically starving the civilian sector. Defense spending now eats up 40% of the public budget, and that's fueling inflation and creating labor shortages. And to plug the budget gap, the Kremlin solution is to just tax its own people even more. Okay, so we've seen the nuts and bolts of how this is working. Now let's try to get inside the mindset, the worldview that's driving the Kremlin's strategic gamble. And look, this isn't us speculating. This is a direct quote from Russia's own official military doctrine. It's written down in black and white. It explicitly calls the expansion of NATO and its military infrastructure near Russian borders a primary military risk. This is the official, stated reason for its hostile posture toward the West. So, how do you keep the country on board with all of this? Well, on the home front, it boils down to a three-part playbook. Step 1, good old-fashioned repression. You silence anyone who speaks out. Step 2, control the narrative through total censorship and surveillance. And step 3, you buy loyalty, offering huge financial benefits and status that tie the fate of soldiers and their families directly to the success of the war. And beneath all of that, there's this really fascinating and kind of dark psychological tool at work. It's a concept called krugovaya poruka, or mutual responsibility. The idea is to make everyone in the elite and the bureaucracy complicit in what's happening. That way, their loyalty is guaranteed not just by rewards, but by a shared risk. If everyone's hands are dirty, it's a lot harder for anyone to break ranks. So when you put all of this together, you arrive at this massive crossroads, and not just for Russia, but for the entire world. Analysts are basically seeing two starkly different futures that could come out of this conflict. And the two paths forward are really night and day. In one scenario, Western aid dries up. Russia achieves a military victory, and an emboldened Moscow could start making new demands on its neighbors. In the other scenario, sustained Western support allows Ukraine to hold its ground, maybe even make gains, which could create the conditions for real de-escalation talks from a position of strength. The outcomes really could not be more different. And this quote, man, it just nails the ultimate stakes here. For many observers in the West, this isn't just about a piece of land. It's seen as a fundamental challenge to the entire international system that's been in place since the Cold War. And this idea right here is the absolute bedrock of the Kremlin's long-term strategy. They frame this not as a war against Ukraine, but as an eternal, existential struggle against the West. Why? Because that creates a permanent justification for mobilization. The core belief is that Russia's system, built for the long haul, can simply outlast the patience and political cycles of its democratic rivals. So here's where we're left. You have a nation forged by this long, hard history of centralization and survival, and it's now placing a massive bet on its future. The outcome isn't just going to define Russia for generations to come, it could reshape the entire global order. The question isn't just how this is happening anymore, it's where does it all end?